Let us now look at the EBP test. Elementary business process is defined as this. It is basically a task performed by one or more actors in one place at one time, achieving a measurable business results. Once again, let me repeat it. It's a task performed by one or more actors in one place at one time, achieving a measurable business result. Now the word at one time can also be substituted, and you can think of, can X number of actors come together to achieve a particular business goal in one meeting? So if that were to be the definition, let's understand its implication or what it really means through an example. Let's assume that one of the use cases that I've identified for one of the systems that I'm trying to model is, I'm going to call it as a negotiate a supplier contract. Let's also assume that I'm one of the manufacturers of chairs, computer desk chairs, and I actually want to supply to the company to which you're actually working on. Now, if you were representing the company and I am the manufacturer of these chairs, do you think we will be able to have one meeting, meet in one single place and come up with a supplier contract? Or is it possible or is it not? Most often then it's actually not possible, because even before you come up with a supplier contract, there's going to be n number of steps that probably needs to happen before we can even meet and then say, yes, this is going to be the contract that both of us get to sign, based on which I get to supply chairs and you get to make payments against that particular chairs. And hence EBP is the maximum side of our size test or the granularity test. So if you were to identify use cases and you tend to be adding way too much into one single one of them, this is the test that actually comes and says, don't put too many things into one single thing. So make sure that what you're trying to say as part of a use case can actually help you achieve one single business measurable result, and it does not consist of too many things as one single block. Don't make them extremely complex or too big. Make them into one simple measurable result and make that into a use case. So let's quickly summarize the 4 tests that we have spoken about so far. Naming test is about what is the right way to name a given use case. A good use case should ideally have a noun and a verb. Whereas the size and the granularity test is basically a way of saying how big or how small should we identify the various use cases that we typically come up with for a particular system. Within that, BOSS test was basically a way of achieving 2 things. Number 1, make sure that the name conveys what is happening from a business perspective, and also the fact that it is not too small so that your boss is going to be unhappy with that particular, either the improper communication of the intent of the use case or the size of it. That was a BOSS test. Whereas EBP basically says on the maximum side of the size, it says do not put too many things under one single use case such that it becomes far more complex. So size or the granularity test was basically a way of ensuring all of the use cases that we identified should typically be of similar size. And as I mentioned earlier, yes, we know that this is not a numerical scale, so we cannot exactly say what is the right size of a use case, but we put it against a given scale which actually had the BOSS test on the minimum side and the EBP on the maximum side. So any use case which actually passes all these 4 tests is actually a valid use case name. Now that we have learned how to identify use cases correctly using the 4 tests, let's apply it to the exercise that we started doing in the previous video. I hope you remember the ABC car rental agency problem statement, and if I were to apply these 4 tests that we just spoke about, we probably should have come up with these 4 or 5 use cases. Book a rental vehicle, and then you get to manage that particular booking itself, then pick up a rental vehicle, return the rental vehicle, and something like an update the rental agreement. And the actors that we could have identified based on that one particular one pager were the customer himself, a CSR who probably would take the phone call and help you with either making a booking or updating a booking, and a person, I've just called it as a garage representative. He is the person who probably will help you in giving you the car when you go there to pick it up, or take the car back after you're done using it and then you're trying to return. Let me also make another statement here. Now, it is important for one to understand the domain itself before we actually do this. So I'm not trying to say one will be able to come up with good use case identification or use case diagrams without having no knowledge about the domain in which the particular application is supposed to work in. So having the domain knowledge itself is extremely important. And once you know a little bit about that particular domain, the 4 tests that we spoke about a couple of slides back is a way of helping us identify what the right use cases are. Before I end this lecture, I also wanted to give you a slide on some of the further readings that you can actually follow up on. I've mentioned the Craig Larman book here. That's the one that I was referring to when I talked about the 4 tests. So that's a good read. Applying UML and Patterns, 3rd edition. And also take a look at Use Case 2.0 by Ivar Jacobson. That will give you a much better idea of how use cases still work and can still be used as part of any kind of agile methodologies that you might actually be following. As part of this particular course, I'm actually not focused, I've not talked anything about extends and includes, which is a concept that's important to understand in terms of use case and use case diagrams themselves. So once you have mastered what we've actually presented in this particular course, I would urge all of you to go back and learn about includes and extends.
With that, we come to the end of this particular video. Here's a quick look at what we did. We started off defining what use case modeling was, and then looked at the 2 main components of use case modeling, which is use case diagrams and use case definitions. And then we spent a bit of time trying to identify or trying to learn the 4 unit tests by Craig Larman, which will help us identify use cases correctly. In the next section, we're going to be looking at a demo as to how to write use cases using StarUML. I'll see you guys later then.